Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are taking a look at a game from the ongoing TCC Swiss 7. That's Leela against Seer. It's been a while, but I thought I'd have a little look at the TCC again. I've been doing a lot of human games recently, and you just notice how differently you look at human games than engine games. I mean, with human games, you've got a lot of ideas about, oh, that looked wrong, or would that really have been good? Wasn't there something here? You know, and then the engines find lots of amazing ways to either justify or tweak what you thought. With engine games, it's more about being amazed at what they do in certain situations. You can pretty much trust the calculation from both sides normally, but yeah, it's simply looking at positions and saying, "Wow, I wouldn't have done it that way." And well, this game had a number of those moments, so just wanted to share that with you. So the opening was b3 e5, bishop b2 d6 e3. And now f5, which is a little bit premature from black. The point is that after d4, you really would want to answer something with e takes d4, for example. If you played e4, which is the end of the book, well, you want to be a little bit careful about doing that, because now there's no f pawn barrier to this bishop on b2. So this bishop's got a pretty free rein. It's not even completely easy for black to put a bishop on g7 to challenge it. So there's a little bit that's wrong with that opening. I mean, it shouldn't be so bad, but it's definitely not what you want against 1b3. I mean, normally something like knight c6 is normal on move 3, and if d4, then you could just take there. You can't take back with a piece. You could even play d5 when white's got a rather odd exchange French with a bishop on b2. That sort of thing is pretty decent. However, f5, d4, e4 was the end of the book. And Leela played the move d5 just to open up that diagonal, and that's a pretty good idea. So knight f6, and now interesting moment already. Queen d2, a6, and knight c3. I mean, there's something that just feels a bit funny about playing the bishop to b2 and the knight to c3. I mean, normally in these sort of queen's pawn openings where you've played the pawn to d4, you follow up not with bishop d3, you follow up with c4, and then play the knight out to c3. Just to have a good solid structure and to restrict the opponent on the queen side. So yeah, this was the first moment where I just sort of thought, okay, knight c3, interesting. I mean, I might have. Normally, if you don't keep the c4 square free, then you might be looking at something playing like a4 and then knight a3 to c4. Not necessarily immediately, but that's more what you'd be thinking. You'd be thinking of putting a knight on c4, saying, I don't want to put a pawn on c4. I want to get a good square on c4 for the knight instead. But Leela doesn't even do that, just plays knight c3. But what Leela does is pretty natural as well. Castling queenside is also an interesting one there, because after this move c5 from black, then it looks like black's going to get counterplay with b5. You can't, it's a little bit risky to try and stop it now with a4, because after b5 you can just do that like a pawn sacrifice and open up the queen side. So yeah, I mean, castle's queenside is also pretty interesting, I have to say. It's just shows how aggressively the engines play nowadays. It's really not caring that much about safety, really. When they've got a clear advantage, they just really go for the kill. So knight h3 played, b5, knight e2, and what white's doing, white's just really aiming for this e6 square. The knight's going to come around g5, f4 and aim for e6. Rather unpleasant for black. Black's going to try and absorb it, basically, just try and get the pieces out of range of a knight that lands on e6. It's obviously going to be uncomfortable. Knight b6, attacking the pawn on d5. I mean, that's why you play moves like c4, just to support that pawn, but Leela can support it with a knight here. g6, knight g5, and queen e7. h4, bishop h6. And this is what I mean by trying to absorb a knight coming into e6. You know, the queen has moved to e7, the bishop is on h6, not g7 or f8. So when a knight comes to e6, it's not actually going to be attacking anything. It's going to be rather uncomfortable for black. It's not really what black wants, but okay, at least, you know, nothing's going to be particularly attacked there. Bishop e2, and now a very interesting moment came up, b4. So what is b4 from black? Well, black wants to try and create some counterplay somehow. And, well, I mean, a5 to a4 is the most natural, you know, maybe eventually with a c4 just to try and break things up a bit. But obviously, if you play a5 straight away, then the b5 pawn is hanging. So b4 played, and then you're going to play a5. I mean, you'll have to watch out after a5 for a bishop b5 check. It's not all, it's not all roses in this garden. But yeah, you know, I mean, this is a decent plan for counterplay. It's hard to suggest much else for black. Yeah, I mean, especially, you know, when you're looking at, you know, what could white do then? Well, there's all sorts of ideas with, you know, f3, g4, for example, just undermining these pawns. So, you know, black's got to do something reasonably quickly. But after b4, yeah, I mean, you know, one of the general rules of thumb is that, you know, when you're being attacked on a certain wing, and you can say that white, well, it's quite a way away, but white is going to be attacked, then you tend to avoid pawn moves in that area, because that just tends to weaken you further and give more targets to the opponent. So yeah, you know, I was a bit surprised by Leela's move. I was equally surprised by what Torch and Stockfish wanted to play in the games that I played out, because all of them want to move a pawn on the queen's wing. So yeah, Stockfish and Torch wanted to play c3 and sort of attack that one, and Leela wanted to play the move a4. And this is what Leela played. The idea, of course, is that well, if black doesn't do anything about it, then, well, a5, a4 is no longer possible. So, you know, you're just really restricting black there. And also, of course, there's the threat of a5 chasing this knight away, you know, which might even be very, very dangerous indeed, because this knight doesn't really have any great squares to go to. So that's in there. But yeah, you know, b takes a3, bishop takes a3. You're sort of thinking, well, you know, I mean, in a way, you've done some of black's work for black, you know, by opening up the queen side and giving some sort of targets, you know. So what is Leela's idea here? Well, that's quite interesting. Here, Seer played castles, and you're going to see Leela's idea in its full glory. Well, let's have a little look. Seer castled, and Leela played the move Queen a5, which is really nice. And the idea of that is simply that you're putting the queen on a5, and you're stopping black from getting any sort of counterplay with a5 to a4. So yeah, with this move a4, opening up this diagonal for the queen, you've actually managed, you know, with this maneuver to stop black from getting any sort of attack on the queen side. It's going to take a very long time to manage to do that. So actually, by playing this move, you've managed to slow black's attack down. It's quite unusual, it has to be said. The one thing that I was thinking about was, you know, couldn't black play a5, you know, and just take the risk? But it's a little bit tricky, this one. After a5, we play knight fe6, and bishop b5 checks a very big threat here. It's going to be very, very unpleasant. So there's a very big tactical sequence that the engines were doing. So it's knight takes d5 here, just trying to, I mean, after all, this pawn is weak here, so you're going to try and undermine this knight. Knight f4 from white, that's quite a surprising one. Takes, and it's just that the problem is that these pawns are so weak. So after d5, white plays queen c3 and hits that one and hits that one as well. And after bishop g7, we go takes, queen takes c5, bishop takes c5. And this is a rather unpleasant endgame for black. Yeah, this pawn is weak, knight is loose, and after rook b8 we're playing h5, and yeah, undermining from the other side. I mean, white's idea actually is simply to take off, and then go rook h1 and invade along the h file. You don't necessarily notice it, really, really clearly at this moment, but it's just that white's mobility is way, way bigger. Actually this rook is tied down to this knight, this bishop is not developed and doesn't necessarily have a very good square. There are problems in black's position, but it's not 100% obvious just by looking at it. And well, the tactical sequence that we got was quite nice. Here we are making use of this H file, but a piece sacrifice from Torch here. And after knight d7, there's this very nice move, bishop h5, with the idea of knight takes c5, g7, check, and then g8 queen. So king d8, and then bishop e3 played, g takes f4, bishop d2. I like this one a lot, threatening bishop a5. Hitting the king from the other side, rook b5, and now g7. And, well, black's a pawn up here, but obviously position's a bit of a mess. This pawn's weak, rook defending it, this pawn's hanging as well. And rook on the 7th, 2 bishops. Yeah, again, as a human play, you'd sort of say, I guess clear advantage for white. For the engines, it's just, winning, just don't talk to me anymore. But that was Torch versus Stockfish, with Stockfish playing the move a5, which I'd given to it. I think that the engines also played a5 a couple of times, but yeah, they sort of thought it was also quite bad. So it wasn't necessarily their main move. But yeah, even with a5 to stop Leela's plan, things are still going quite badly there. After castles, queen a5, bishop b2. Seer played bishop d7. Another amazing moment here, actually, because after rook b7, the engines once again, totally breaking this wisdom about not making a pawn move on the side where your king is, where it could be under attack. Yeah, Stockfish played b4, and Torch did it too. It's just what the engines want. The idea is after c takes b4, we go rook d4. And we're going to go rook b4, and we're just going to start attacking on the queen side. There's a chapter in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement which was called Attacking Through the Lines that the Opponent Opened. And it was also something that we've noticed a couple of times in Game Changer in AlphaZero, but in Silicon Road made it even clearer with lots and lots of examples. And this is basically what's happening. White's got this great bind on the king side, and it's tempting to sort of only really be looking there to, how can I make that advantage even bigger? But the engines are just saying, okay, well, that one's in the bag. Let's look on the other side. It's in some ways it's very typical strategy, right? You've got an advantage. You're playing on all sides of the board. Showing that your pieces are much more mobile than the opponent's. But it's still quite shocking, this one, I have to say. The continuation was this. It's quite hard to spot this, and now this moves c4. So basically, what you've done with this whole maneuver is this rook on b7 was active somehow. That was the most active of the rooks. You've exchanged it. This rook isn't doing very much, and you've made this bishop on was a bit passive on c8, try to get out. You've now made it passive behind this very solid wall of pawns, and then you're just absorbing it basically. You know that this b3 pawn long term is gone, so you'll just pick that one up later, and and your knights of course are ready to come into e6, and you can do whatever, win this pawn back, or maybe play h5 then at a later stage. It's incredible. It really is. I really jumped out of my chair when I saw that one. b4. These are really moves that I would not be considering, or if I saw them, I'd sort of say, yeah, come on, but don't be stupid. I can't see what's wrong with them, but you can't do this sort of thing. So really, really funny. Seer played this move, and then knight e6. So took that one, and now a really strange moment as well. This is just really good for white, right? If you go rook c8, the engines wanted h5, g5, and actually just bishop a6, grabbing that pawn. No fear about that at all. And white's a pawn up with 2 bishops, great control, black pieces all over the shop basically. If you go rook e8, we play c4, solidify that pawn now, and we're going to have bishop b5. Keeping on harassing the knight is just terrible. this looks like one of the all-time worst positions, I think. King c2, and white's ready now to invade on the side of the board that black tried to open for counterplay. So, that's really horrible. But what was really striking was that Seer played bishop g7, and not a single engine wants to take on f8. They don't want to take the exchange. They just play the move h5. And I mean, that's really quite striking. I mean, knight takes f8 is just much, much better for white. It's just winning as well. So there's no reason not to play it. But somehow the engines, they value mobility so much more than material, than actually what Leela is doing in this position is giving away a pawn in order to increase its mobility. It's now got an unchallenged bishop on b2, and that's more important than winning the exchange. And it's one of those weird things as well, because I could really understand saying, okay, that knight on e6 is worth more than a rook on f8. So I don't want to swap off that knight on e6. I'm going to keep it there, to exert influence. That is something, it's very typical human thought. You see this in lots of of great human games. But the idea of no, I could just win the exchange here, but no, I'm going to give a pawn up. I'm going to give up a pawn. I'm going to give up that great knight on e6, and I'm going to increase the activity of my bishop on b2. And this is increasing my advantage, moving it from +2 to +4 or whatever. That's quite brilliant, really. It really is brilliant. And it's superb judgment. And as I said, it's that thing about, it's not the fact of the knight is so strong on e6. I'll keep it there. It's worth more than a rook. No, it's the idea of, this bishop on b2. If that one gets, unchallenged on that diagonal, it's just going to be great for me. So, so I'll swap off my strong knight, not for that rook, but for the bishop. It's really, certainly in this position, it's not obvious at all. Of course, this is there's a very, very strong idea here, namely that we can take on h7, and actually the engines are just saying, well, at some stage I can take on f6, I can take on h7, that'll get me one pawn back, and then at some stage I can take on a6 as well, and that'll get me another extra pawn, and I'm just going to win. I'm just going to win like that, even if you manage to defend properly. But Leela doesn't, both Torch and Stockfish were taking on f6 now and doing this sort of stuff. Leela just builds up, as Leela does, rook 1, h3, preparing actually to play the queen e1 round to h1, queen d8. You could swap off the queens again, take on here, take on f6, take on h7, and then take on a6 later. That wins, of course. But Leela played the move queen e1, and this queen on e1 it's a really great piece. It's a really lovely placement of the queen. It's got so much potential. It can come round to h1. That will happen if you just did something like a5. Then we're coming queen h1, and we're going to grab this one. It's also keeping in touch with the c3 square for this battery. And it's also keeping in touch with the a5 square. It's stopping the black queen from coming to a5, and if it needs to, it could come back to a5 to block the a pawn. So it's really nice, piece placement. So c4 was played by Seer, a bit desperate, but the idea is to distract this bishop away from this diagonal so that you can maybe put a knight on h5 later. That's the idea. But so after rook f7, Leela now took on f6, played rook h7. No fears about the check. We just come out here. Check, we'll go to e2, and the king is safe, so no worries about that. Rook h7, knight h5, takes. That was why the bishop was distracted to c4 by c4 to play the knight to h5. And black, seems to have maybe a couple of threats, queen a1 or something. But now white plays this lovely idea, queen a5 back. And this time it's to cover a1. And also it's got all sorts of little threats here, queen a6, queen c7. The knight on h5 is sort of, for now, just routed to h5 to stop the rook coming in. So queen d8 was played, and now Leela decided that's enough. We're just going to take and take. And, Leela's just in an ending a couple of pawns up, just Just like that, basically, just with this strategy all over the board, just end up with a couple of extra pawns. So that didn't cause much problem. Just a couple of nice little points to point out. I thought bishop e2 was very nice. Stop the knight coming back to h5, and also prepare to play the move c4. It's all about solidifying your structure at the right moment. I mean, we saw it in that game between Torch and Stockfish, where bishop b7 to 8 was played, and then you play c4 to reinforce d5. And now in this endgame again, you don't want a piece defending this d5 pawn. Let the pawn do the job. And just to explain as well that knight d5, bishop c4 would have been a rather horrible pin there. So what have we got here? So after c4, rook b8, rook h1, f4. Interesting idea now from Leela. Played the move f3. I like this idea a lot. The idea is if you go f takes c3, I go f takes c4. And again, we've got this sort of pin here. And actually the engines were looking to play stuff like e5 next. And after d takes c5, black's just got these useless double pawns for passed pawns, and then white's got 3 passed pawns on the queen side. That was one of the ideas. But what I particularly liked was that, so Seer played e takes f3, check, king g7, just chase the king back, gf3, fe3, king c3. And these are always the sign of mastery. It's not complicated or anything, but I did notice this when I was playing shogi. In actual fact, I'll just explain a little bit. The point is that this pawn on e3, you've given it away, but it's doomed long run. White is always going to be able, you protect b3, to surround it and then win it. You just know that to be an absolute fact. So, you can actually, that enables you to stretch your strategy, right? You could play f3 because you knew, well, even if he gets that pawn, long term, 4-5 moves ahead, I'll always be getting it back. I just know it. I can judge that. And, in chess, I can do that. This is not so complicated. You can do this sort of stuff very easily. You sort of know which things you're going to survive and which not. But always notice when I played shogi, I was a decent player for shogi, but all those sort of judgments, you're watching master games and you're saying, oh my god, he's losing a pawn or whatever, and then nobody seems to care, and then it gets picked up later. And I always noticed that was that ability to that judgment, long-term judgment about what can survive, what can't. That is part of mastery in chess. And just notice this one with Leela. It was quite nice. So here, you just know, you're attacking it. Rook e8, I go rook e1. If you go e2, I can attack it with, I could block you with bishop f5 to e6, for example. I could play bishop d3. Lots of ideas there. So g4 played, rook takes e3, takes, and Leela was a couple of pawns up and won this very comfortably. Let's just go through that quickly. You can do it in pretty much any way you want. Rook b1, offering the exchange of rooks, and now b6 is coming in. Just stop any checks there. Sort of be super cautious, and then just win. And that was made in a few more moves. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that first look at engine games in quite a little while. As I said, there were just a number of moments that interested me a lot. I mean, this idea of not playing c4 early, just playing with the pieces, and not even trying to use this c4 square for the pieces. That was quite interesting. Castling queenside, certainly, real aggression somehow from the beginning, and always quite striking when engines do this. But this whole thing, what all the engines wanted to do, I think Leela's way was just the nicest somehow. That this move a4, playing on the side where the opponent's attacking, but then using using your pieces just to block that attack. It was really, really nice. And once again, I mean, this idea in the variations, this idea of playing b4, and coming through the channel that the opponent wanted to open. It's just very, very powerful indeed. And it just shows that whole board vision, that we're always talking about with engines, and that with humans you've got to try and develop. And then, this other very nice moment here where, Where the human judgment might have been, oh, I'm not going to exchange off my knight for that rook. That knight's too good, and you would have done everything to try and maintain a knight on e6. For Leela, it's just going with that one step further, right? It's not you're saying, well, long term, if I get rid of that dark squared bishop, then I'm really just then my bishop is unchallenged, and that's an even bigger advantage than I have now. And you do it together with a pawn sacrifice as well, which just has the idea actually also of making this knight very passive. On f6, I mean, you could have taken on g7 already, but on f6 this knight might have a chance of coming round d7 to e5, for example, and the black position is a lot more harmonious with the knight on f6. But g7 is a known bad square for knights. Very limited mobility on the corner of the board, and here especially it's restricted by a pawn on d5. It can't go to h5 because of bishop h5. And of course, it's not protecting h7 at all, which the knight was doing on f6. So you play rook h6. So, it's not even just that judgment about, oh, I want to get the bishop for my knight on e6. It's also putting it together with a pawn sacrifice to open a file for an additional invasion channel for white, and also misplacing a black knight. I mean, you put it all together, and you just realise, the amount of the layers of positional judgment that are making up that decision, and that's always really impressive somehow. Again, if I look at myself, I might have thought, oh, for heaven's sake, take the rook. I mean, you're bound to be winning this. That's possible. Or if I was, really, feeling very confident and all that, I would have looked, at taking on g7, or maybe waiting a little bit and then taking on g7 later and saying, yeah, that bishop, is more important to me than the rook. I mean, look how little the rook is doing. It's got no open files to attack. This bishop is definitely a better piece. But to put it all together like this, sacrifice a pawn then on top, create an open file, have that judgment, not worry about giving up that gorgeous knight on e6. It's a lot. It's a lot of layers of judgment, and it's really, really impressive. Not impossible for a human player, but yeah, I think you need quite a few examples like this in order to get the confidence that this is right. Because I think that's always the thing during practical games. It's always about proportionality. You think about a lot of ideas, but you're always thinking as well of is this necessary? Do I need to give up a pawn and just take a bishop, or instead of just grabbing the exchange and bringing the exchange up? Is it proportional to the position, or am I just having a mirage somehow? Getting carried away with my imagination. And well, the engines always seem to get carried away with their imagination and make it and show that that's the best way of doing it. But obviously for humans, it's a bit more tricky sometimes. But there we are. Hope you're enjoying this. I'm gonna, keep an eye on the TCEC just to for any great games there. The Swiss is always a fun event, and otherwise, yeah, plenty more to come. A few more, quite a few Reengineering the Chess Classics videos to come as well. And well, we'll see what all comes along. Thanks very much for watching. If you liked the video, give a like, subscribe to the channel, take a look at my new books. And otherwise, hope to see you at the next videos. Thanks for watching.